Welcome to the Using Node.js video series from MarkLogic University. This video is the first part in a series of topics covering the use of the MarkLogic Node.js Client API. In this video, we're going to discover how MarkLogic and the Node.js Client API enable you to leverage diverse data within your applications, including JSON, XML, full text, binary, and RDF triple data as well. And we'll explore these concepts in action using a freely available app that we call Geophoto. So today we're going to look at this app called Geophoto. And it's built on MarkLogic 8 and implemented using a three-tiered architecture that consists of an AngularJS front end, a Node.js middle tier, which communicates to a MarkLogic database backend using the MarkLogic Node.js Client API. And as we explore this application, you're going to see how it enables all of your data to come together and be used in a very flexible and schema-agnostic way inside of MarkLogic. And specifically, this application is going to deal with JSON data, binary documents like image files, as well as geospatial data and RDF triples. So let's take a look at how this application works. And like so many things in today's world, it all starts out with you and your phone. So let's imagine that you find yourself out at the annual MarkLogic World User Conference in San Francisco. And you're able to find a few hours of free time, and you decide to go out and explore the city, and all of a sudden you come across this amazing view of the Golden Gate Bridge. So what do? You pull out your phone and you snap a photo. So now you've got this photo. You've created an image, a JPEG, and that's a binary file, and that file could be stored and managed inside of the MarkLogic database. But what you might not have realized is that when you take that photo on your phone, you're also capturing a whole host of metadata information about camera settings and your mobile device. And if you have geolocation services enabled on your phone, you're also going to capture the latitude and longitude data of where that picture was taken. All of that metadata is stored in EXIF form, or EXIF. And that information is going to be very valuable to us if we wanted to build an application about your photos. And so in order to use that EXIF metadata, we need to be able to extract it from the image itself. And that's where MarkLogic's Node.js Client API is going to come into play. It makes it very easy for us to ingest the image and leverage a freely available library distributed through the NPM ecosystem to extract that EXIF metadata. And when we extract that metadata, we can then store not only the image in our database, but also that metadata as a JSON document. And if we look inside of this metadata that we've extracted, we'll see that it will also contain the geospatial location of where that picture was taken. Now that's going to be really useful to us as we build this application. At this point in time, we've got a binary, we've got geospatial data, and we've got JSON data. But think of how much more we could do if we actually knew what that point represented. So we have the latitude and longitude, and that's good. But what if we wanted to do a facet on the country or the city that this picture was taken? Or what if we wanted to provide our users additional context about the location or the subject in this photo? It would be really helpful if we could enrich this data even further. And once again, that's where MarkLogic's Node.js Client API is going to come into play. It makes it very easy to interact with third-party web services. And some of those web services out there can do what we call geoencoding. And in this case, we're actually going to do reverse geoencoding, where we pass the latitude and longitude to a web service, and it will return to us the location of that photo, such as in this example, San Francisco and the United States. And we're going to enrich that JSON data in the database with this additional information. And now we have the data necessary if we wanted to implement facets on either the city or the country where our photos were taken. So this is good, but remember that MarkLogic is more than just a database for binaries and JSON and XML and full text. It's also a database for triples. And what we'd like to do now is enrich what we know about this location through freely available information on the linked open data web. And the Node.js client API, teamed with server-side JavaScript in MarkLogic, is going to make it easy for us to implement this. Because we can take this location, such as the country being the United States, and we could pass that off to a web service such as the one that DBpedia provides, and execute a Sparkle query against DBpedia or any other source on the linked open data web, and return triples about this particular location. And here we see some examples of triple data modeled inside of MarkLogic. And now what we've done is we've included in our database not only the binary image of the photo we took, but also the JSON metadata, the latitude and longitude geospatial data, and the semantic triples about that location. So we have a very rich data set now for which we can build our application on top of. And that's really the story here. MarkLogic enables you to take advantage of all the different forms of data that you might encounter and leverage APIs that make it very easy to work with that data, such as our Node.js client API and server-side JavaScript. So let's go ahead and now take a look at the actual Geophoto application. So for the sake of time, I've already set up the application on my local machine, but I just want you to remember that you could also do this on your own local machine if you so desire. And it's really easy to do. You just have to go out to the MarkLogic GitHub site and find the Geophoto application. Now I'll give you this link at the end of the tutorial so you can go ahead and do that. And when you do get to this site, you're going to notice that there are some instructions, and it's all very clearly documented how to go ahead and get set up. And there's some scripts that you can run that will deploy the databases, deploy the necessary application server, and configure those resources as well. So after you've completed that script for the setup, you should then be able to go out and validate that the resources were created. So here in the admin interface, we see that I now have a database called Geophoto Content. And if I look at that particular database, we would see all of the necessary indexes. For example, the triple index has been enabled. This will be necessary for the semantic Sparkle queries that we'll be running. And we also see that the geospatial index has been configured. And you'll notice that it's been defined at a property name called location with a specific child property called coordinates. So now we have the necessary databases, app server, and indexes. We would also go out in Query Console, and we could notice that those databases are now viewable here. And if I went and selected the Geophoto Content database and clicked Explore here, we would see that it currently is empty right now. And that's where we're going to get started. We're going to start with ingesting data into the database and then taking a look at the application on top of that data. So let's get started by loading the data. The first thing to notice is that when you clone the Geophoto app from the GitHub repository, we're going to actually provide you with some sample data. These are images that I took on my phone or that my colleagues submitted, and these are good test images that you can use to validate the application. But afterwards, of course, feel free to experiment with some images of your own. So if we look out here in the data folder, you'll notice a child folder called Photos. In here we have a handful of different pictures taken from around the world. These are the images that we're going to load. You'll also notice, if you go out and look at the folder in your project directory called Import, that we have a script, import.js. This is the application code that's going to ingest these images and handle all of the extraction of the metadata, the semantic enrichment, and the geo encoding. So let's go ahead and run the data load. In order to run the data load, I'm going to first tell Node to run the import.js file. So I'm going to key in node import.js, and that's going to execute the import.js script, which needs to be passed an additional parameter indicating where the data is that you would wish to load. And in our case, that is relative to the import directory, and it's in that directory that we looked at called data, and then the child folder inside of there called photos. So I pass in these parameters, I hit enter, and this will trigger the ingestion of that data. Now during the ingestion process is when all of the magic happens. So this is where the EXIF metadata gets extracted. This is where the calls to the web services get handled that do the reverse geoencoding, and that also go out and create the triples that are going to be stored in the MarkLogic database as well. So if we go out and take a look at some of the logging that is done after this ingestion is completed, we see that we have a whole bunch of JSON and JPEG documents that were inserted into the database. We also see that there's a reference to the installation of a module. Notice this here, /ext/countries.sjs. This is the server-side JavaScript that is going to handle the Sparkle query out to DBpedia's Sparkle endpoint to create the triples. And when we find a country that doesn't have triples represented in the MarkLogic database, we're going to go ahead and create those. And so for this first data load, every time we encounter a new country, we go ahead and create those triples. So you can see some of these different countries that are having triples created. Now, we could load multiple images from the same country. That's perfectly valid. And in that scenario, the ingestion script is optimized to understand that those triples already exist for that country, and therefore we don't need to go out and request and create those triples again. So now that we have this data loaded, let's go ahead and take a look at it inside of Query Console. Okay, so here we are now back inside of Query Console. And if we go and click Explore on our Geophoto content database, we're now going to see that we have a whole handful of documents that we've ingested. We have binary documents, like our picture taken in San Francisco. We also have JSON documents for each of these photos that were taken. And for example, here's the JSON data representing that photo taken in San Francisco. And we also have triples. And for every country that a photo was taken in, we now have triples about that country. So for example, if we wanted to see all the triples that we have in our database about the United States, we could write a Sparkle query that would go out and return that data. So here we see a very simple select Sparkle query where we're querying from a named graph called country data, and we're looking for triple patterns that have a subject of the IRI that represents the United States and any predicate and any object. In other words, we're asking, what do we know about the United States? And if we run this, we would see all of the interesting things that we might learn about the United States, including things like the anthem, the capital, the website, this abstract description. We have a reference to the flag, a reference to the map, its currency. All of this supplemental information that can be used to enrich our user's experience. So now that we've taken a look at the data inside of Query Console, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual application. Here we are at the main landing page of the Geophoto application. And you'll notice if you look at the address bar here that we're running this on localhost port 4000. This is an instance of an express application server that's been set up as part of that three-tier architecture that we discussed earlier. Now let's take a look at some of the application features. The first page of interest is our map page, and here we see overlaid on the Google Maps interface all of the photos that we've ingested into our database. So if we want to search and explore this interface, we can do so. We can either look at the chart of photos that we see down here below, or we can explore directly on the map. So let's go find that photo that was taken in San Francisco. So I'm going to zoom in here on San Francisco, where we actually notice that multiple photos were taken. But knowing a little bit about San Francisco, I know that the Golden Gate Bridge is up here in the northern part of the city, and so this should be our Golden Gate Bridge picture. And sure enough, there it is. Now, we might want to learn a little bit more about this photo, or we might want to make some edits to this photo. We can do so. So I'm going to click on the little edit button here, where we see yet a little bit more detail. We start to see some of that data that's stored in the JSON document about this photo. For example, this photo was taken on an Apple iPhone 4. We also start to see the semantic data at play. And if we scroll down here, we see all of this information that we know about the United States where this photo was taken. For example, the capital is Washington, D.C. The currency is the US dollar. All of this information down here is coming out of the triples in our database. Now, we might decide that we want to make some changes. This image doesn't have a caption, so maybe we decide we'd like to do an edit. So if I go in here and click, I can give this image a caption. For example, I was hiking in the Presidio, and the official color of the bridge is International Orange. Now, if I want to make that change, I simply click Save, and what we've done is an update transaction against that JSON data in our database. More on that as we continue to explore this series on using the Node.js API. The last bit of functionality that we see here is a more detailed map view. So if you really wanted to zoom in on the location that photo was taken, we can do so here. So the map page is one way of interfacing with our images in the database, but we also have the search page. Let's check this out. And if we look at the search page, we'll notice that there's actually two ways to search our database. We have a geospatial search, and we have a text search. Let's go ahead and start by taking a look at the text search. So if you recall, in the last example, I did an update to our picture from San Francisco where we added a caption. So let's go ahead and use that. I should be able to go out and do something like a search for San Francisco. And if you notice, that returns 3 different matches. I could constrain that even further. I might choose to use AND logic and say San Francisco and Golden. Now I've constrained that to only 1 match, and that is in fact our Golden Gate Bridge picture. So full textual based searches are one type of thing that are very easy to implement inside of MarkLogic, and we'll explore that in more detail later on in this series. Now, another way to search our database is using geospatial search and identifying a particular region of the world that we're interested in. So in this type of search, we can go out and draw a shape on our map. And here I'm drawing a shape over roughly northern Africa and the Mediterranean, including Italy. And I see the matches. And I could take a look at one of these particular matches. And here we see a photo that was taken in Italy. And we see all of that additional semantic data for Italy as well. So now that we've taken a look at some of the features implemented in the Geophoto app, the next logical question is, how does it all work? What's going on under the covers enabling this functionality? And that's exactly what we're going to explore as we go forward in this series on using the Node.js Client API in MarkLogic. Today we've taken a look at Geophoto, and as we go forward, we're going to look at how did those documents get ingested? How did we read documents from the application? How do we update and delete documents? All of this will be addressed through a series of episodes on CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. The other component to that application is the search side of things. And so we'll also spend some time in this series taking a look at how to implement search using the Node.js Client API, including string query, query by example or QBE, and structured query. So in summary, today we've taken a look at an implementation using MarkLogic 8 and the Node.js Client API, enabling you to manage all of your data across all of its diverse forms, including such things as JSON data, binary, geospatial, and RDF. As a next step, if you haven't done so already, please go out to our developer community site, download the product, install it, get a free developer license. You can also go out to the GitHub site where you can grab the Geophoto app and clone it on your local machine and follow those setup instructions. And if you need additional training, please remember to check back all of the other content that we have on our on-demand training site, as well as all of the free instructor-led training that we have available, which you can access and register for off of our website, marklogic.com/training. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you again for some of the future episodes in this series on using the MarkLogic Node.js Client API.